You really showed up, my sister laughed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. No one wanted you here, Claire. I smiled. I picked out a gift box slowly, held it out toward her, and said, "That's about to change. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 34. I work as an editor for small publishing houses. Nothing glamorous. I sit behind a screen, fix other people's words, and make sure their stories land the way they should. Ironic, right? I spent years making everyone else's voice clearer while my own went completely unheard. In my family, there has always been a hierarchy. My younger sister, Diane, sits at the top. She's the one my parents brag about at dinner tables. She's the one whose photos go on the fridge, whose promotions get celebrated with cake, whose opinions fill every room she walks into. She's loud, she's charming, and she has always known exactly how to keep the spotlight on herself. And then there's me. I'm the one who shows up early to help set up chairs. I'm the one who remembers every birthday, every anniversary, every small detail that no one else bothers to track. I do these things quietly, consistently, and without complaint. In return, I get a polite nod at best. My writing, which I've done since I was 16, gets called a nice little hobby. My job gets described as something to keep her busy. My presence at family events is expected but never celebrated. I used to think that if I just kept showing up, kept being reliable, kept being good, something would shift. That one day someone would look at me and actually see me. I wasn't rich, I wasn't flashy, but I had something they never once stopped to consider. And on the night of my mother's birthday party, they were about to find out exactly what that was. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button. I know how that feels more than I ever wanted to. Share your story in the comments. I read them all. And if you've ever been underestimated, click hype. Let's get into this. The party was held at my parents' house, the same house I grew up in. My mother had turned 60 and Diane had organized the whole event. I found out about it through a group message sent 4 days before the date. Not a personal call, not a conversation, a group message, the kind you send to people you've forgotten to include until the last moment. I still went. I wrapped a gift carefully, took the bus across town, and arrived with a smile on my face because that's what I do. The moment I walked through the front door, the smell of roasted food and candle wax hit me. The living room was full. Relatives I hadn't seen in months, family friends, neighbors. My mother was laughing at the center of it all, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She glanced over when I walked in and gave me a small wave before turning back to her conversation. Diane spotted me immediately. She crossed the room with a glass of wine in her hand, and she smiled the way she always smiles at me. Wide on the surface, sharp underneath. "Wow, you actually came?" she said, loud enough for the cluster of cousins nearby to hear. "I honestly thought you'd avoid embarrassing yourself." A few people laughed, awkward and low. No one stepped in. No one said a word in my defense. I kept my expression even. "Happy birthday to Mom," I said simply, and moved toward the kitchen. For the next hour, I helped carry plates, refill drinks, and clear napkins from tables. Nobody asked me to. Nobody thanked me either. I was just there, moving through the edges of the party like a shadow, useful but unnoticed. When it came time for the toast, Diane stood up with her glass raised and her voice carrying across every corner of the room. "I want to thank everyone who actually contributes to this family," she said warmly, her eyes doing a slow sweep of the room. They landed on me for exactly 1 second, long enough to make a meaning clear. My mother smiled and lifted her glass. I held mine and said nothing. Then, near the gift table, Diane turned to the room one more time, casual, almost bored. "Honestly," she said, loud and easy, "nobody even asked you to come." The room went quiet, that particular kind of quiet that is worse than noise. I felt every pair of eyes find me at once. I didn't flinch, I didn't look away. I reached over to the gift table, picked up the box I had brought, and held it quietly in my hands. That was the moment I made my decision. I was not leaving this party the same way I had left every other one before it. After the toast, I stayed near the edge of the room, but something inside me had settled into a different kind of stillness. Not the numb, shrinking stillness of someone trying to not be noticed, something colder, more deliberate. I overheard Diane in the hallway, speaking to 2 of our cousins in a low, breezy tone. "She just shows up like she belongs," Diane said, and they laughed softly. I stood around the corner and let the words land without reacting. I had not been included in any part of planning this party. Not the menu, not the decorations, not the guest list. I was an afterthought added to a group message, expected to arrive quietly and disappear the same way. That was the first thing. The second came about 20 minutes later, when Diane gathered a small crowd near the dining table and launched into a story about the family over the past year, all the highlights and achievements. She listed names with pride. Mine was not among them. Then she added, almost as a punchline at the end, "And Claire is still figuring things out, bless her heart." She said it with a smile smile so practiced it looked genuine. The guests cluckled. I pressed my lips together and breathed slowly through my nose. That was the second thing. The third was my mother. She found me near the kitchen doorway and pulled me gently by the elbow into the hallway. Her voice was low and careful. "Don't ruin the mood tonight," she said. "Just ignore her. You know how she gets." She said it like I was the unpredictable one, like my presence was the variable that could break the evening apart. She patted my arm once and walked back to her guests. I stood in that hallway for a moment, alone, with the sound of laughter coming from the living room. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. I looked down at the gift box still under my arm. I wasn't angry. What I felt was cleaner than anger. It was clarity. I walked back into the room and found a chair near the wall. I sat down. I watched. I let them be loud and bright and certain of themselves, and I kept my eyes on the gift table. What they didn't know was that I wasn't the same Claire anymore. For nearly 6 years, I had been writing online under a pen name. Not fiction, not recipes, real stories about real dynamics, about growing up invisible, about emotional neglect wrapped in birthday dinners and polite smiles, about the particular loneliness of being dismissed by the people who are supposed to know you best. I started the blog because I needed somewhere to put the weight of it all. I wrote the first few posts in my apartment at midnight with the lights low and no expectation that anyone would read them, but people did read them, slowly at first, and then quickly, and then in numbers I genuinely didn't know how to process. My family, ironically, had opinions about writers like me. Diane called them those dramatic people online who air out their feelings for attention. My mother once said the internet was full of people who turned ordinary problems into performance. They said these things at the same dinner table where they had spent years making me feel like my ordinary problems weren't worth acknowledging at all. They had no idea they were the source material. My most recent piece had gone widely shared in the weeks before this party. The title was quiet and direct and unmistakable to anyone who knew the situation it described. It was about showing up to family events where your presence is tolerated but never wanted, about smiling through it, about the moment you stop performing forgiveness and start choosing yourself instead. Millions of people had read it. Brands had reached out. My name, my real name, was now attached to the account publicly as of that morning. The gift box I brought to my mother's birthday party did not contain a scarf or a candle or a book token. I had a plan they never saw coming. Her name was Maya, and she was the cousin nobody ever took seriously, which meant she was usually the most honest person in any room. She found me by the wall about an hour into the party, sat down beside me with a plate of food, and spoke quietly without making a scene. "You don't deserve this," she said. "Not tonight, not any night." I looked at her. "You know it, don't you?" She smiled into her food. "I've been reading your blog for 2 years. I only figured it out it was you about 3 months ago." She paused. "You're really good, Claire." I exhaled slowly. Tonight felt like the right time. She nodded. She didn't push or ask questions. She just stayed beside me, which was more than most people had done in a long time. Across the room, Diane was holding court around the gift table, performing generosity as she opened presents one by one. She narrated each one with theatrical enthusiasm, and when she picked up something small or simple, her expression shifted just enough to let everyone see what she thought of it. "Oh, how sweet," she said about a set of kitchen towels, in a voice that meant the opposite. She lifted another box, read the tag. Her eyes found me across the room, and she smiled that wide, sharp smile. "Let's see what this one is," she called out, and the room turned. Hopefully not another notebook. People chuckled. Attention locked onto me. Maya leaned slightly toward me without turning her head. "Ready?" she said quietly. I straightened my posture, uncrossed my legs, and looked at my sister steadily. "Go ahead," I said, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Diane pulled the ribbon loose with the confidence of someone who had never once been surprised by anything. She lifted the lid, looked inside, pulled out the item slowly. It was a printed copy of my most recent blog post. Clean, formatted, professional. Title at the top, author name at the bottom. My real name in clear print. She read the title aloud in her usual mocking tone, the one she uses when she's performing her reaction for the audience. Then she stopped. Her eyes moved down the page. The performance dropped off her face the way color drains from someone who has just understood something they cannot undo. The room noticed the shift immediately. A cousin near the back leaned toward her husband and said something low. Someone else was already looking at their phone. I stood up and walked forward until I was standing at the center of the room. My voice was calm and level. "That story," I said, "is mine. fine. Silence moved through the room like a current. I'm the anonymous writer they're talking about. The blog has been running for 6 years. The post in that box has been read by over 4 million people in the last 2 weeks alone. I have brand partnerships, a literary agent, and a book deal in progress. I updated the author page this morning with my full name. Diane's face had gone still. You're lying, she said. Her voice had lost its performance. It was flat and uncertain. Check the author page, I said. I updated it this morning. The sound of phones unlocking spread through the room like rainfall. People read. People looked up at me. People looked at Diane. The confirmation traveled from one face to the next without a single word needing to be said. My mother stood near the back with her hand over her mouth. Diane set the papers down on the table. She opened her mouth once and closed it again. I took one step closer to her and spoke clearly, without heat, without performance. You said nobody wanted me here. I held her gaze without blinking. Turns out millions of people do. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The loudest room I had ever stood in became the quietest. I didn't make a speech after that. I didn't cry or raise my voice or wait for an apology that was never coming. I simply picked up my bag, said a quiet happy birthday to my mother, who stood frozen near the doorway, and walked out. Maya caught up with me on the front steps. She didn't say much. She put a hand briefly on my shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you." That was enough. I thanked her and kept walking. Behind me, I could hear the low murmur of voices starting again, slower this time, uncertain. Diane's name came up more than once. I didn't stop to listen. In the weeks that followed, I heard through Maya that Diane had gone quiet in family group chats, that a few relatives had privately sent her messages asking about her behavior that night, that my mother had called twice and left voicemails. I had not yet decided whether to return. I wasn't keeping score. I didn't feel victorious in the way I thought might. What I felt was lighter, like I had finally put down something I had been carrying for a very long time without realizing how heavy it had become. I had spent so many years hoping to be seen by people who had already decided not to look, and while I was waiting, I had quietly built a life where strangers across the world read my words at midnight and felt less alone because of them. My family called my writing a hobby. Millions of readers called it necessary. I know which one I believe. Sometimes the loudest rejection leads you directly to the place you were always supposed to be. If you've ever been humiliated in front of others or made to feel like you didn't belong, I understand that pain. Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Subscribe to join a space where your voice matters. And if you've ever been underestimated like this, click hype to help this story reach someone who needs it tonight. Your story has power. If you felt something watching mine, please subscribe and share your journey in the comments below. Every hype you give this video helps put it in front of someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.